Hey guys, it's Ash, and new jobs data came out in the UK this morning, and this is the first report with data from after the budget that came in late October last year. And the data is not good. The number of payrolled employees fell by 32,000 in November and then fell by another 47,000 in December, although the December data is a flash estimate, so it will be revised. Now, this doesn't sound like a big deal. If you look at the chart, it's just a very small movement, but it is extremely unusual for the number of payrolled employees to drop, especially unusual for that to happen 2 months in a row. And remember that this is adjusted data. So the actual numbers are adjusted based on seasonal trends so that you can compare different months to each other because of what happens in different months, so that you can compare July to December, etc. However, I went and got the unadjusted numbers, and in November, the number of jobs actually went up, which is pretty normal. It happens pretty much every single November. The number of jobs increases. But this November, it went up less than normal, hence why the adjusted number for November is negative. But the unadjusted December number is minus 175,000 payroll jobs. And this is the worst December number in this data set by quite a big stretch. It is worse than December 2020 and worse than December 2021 during COVID. In fact, the worst month for job losses in the entire data set is April 2020. That's the month immediately after, the first full month when the whole country went into lockdown, all businesses went into emergency lockdown, people were sat at home, there was widespread panic, remember that? Well, in April 2020, 404,000 payrolled jobs were lost. In December 2024, the most recent month that we just got data for, 175,000 jobs were lost. Almost half as many as in the worst month in this data set when we had completely unprecedented circumstances. That is a pretty staggering fact. Although it is important to point out that there have been other months with big negative numbers as well. January, for example, tends to post very negative numbers, and both January 2024 and January 2023 had bigger payroll job losses than what we've just seen in December. Now, also, here is the revisions triangle for this data. This shows how the estimates change after you get the very first one, whether they move up or down. And you can see that in most of the recent months, the initial jobs estimate was actually too pessimistic, and the numbers then improved over time. So it is very possible, based on this, that the December number that we saw that was very negative will actually be revised upwards as the Office of National Statistics gets better data in the next few months. But having said that, there is something off about how these numbers are adjusted, or perhaps why they are adjusted and when they are adjusted. Look, in September 2024, just a few months ago, there was a pretty big adjustment to the jobs data from July 2014. And then in October 2024, they went and did another pretty big adjustment to that data in the opposite direction. Now, I really struggle to understand what data they could possibly be processing, what data they could possibly be coming across over 10 years later that can move these numbers by pretty big amounts every single month. It sounds like the people that collate and process the statistics data in these reports use some kind of macro assumptions that apply to everyone, some kind of multipliers, I don't know what it is, that distort past data without them realizing or intending to do it, because it doesn't make any sense, right? There is no good reason why you would still be genuinely adjusting data from 10.5 years ago by pretty big amounts every single month. There is no particularly good reason that I can possibly imagine. The only reason that I can possibly imagine is that you really suck at doing your job. Now, that's probable. That's maybe not probable, that's probably likely, actually. I am very sorry for whoever it is that works in the Office of National Statistics, but you suck. This data sucks. Look at it. If you've ever studied maths, just look at it. This is pretty pathetic. Look, in December 2021, you decided that the number of jobs that were added in July 2014 was actually 7,000 higher. And then the very next month, you went and decided, nah, let's move it back down by 7,000. We changed our mind. And then 2 months later, you go, you know what? Actually, let's move it back up. Another 7,500. Again, this is over 7 years after that month's data was collected after it had happened. What the actual fuck is going on here? How reliable is this data? Should we trust it? Anyway, going back to the chart, this is a relatively small downward movement in the overall picture. You can even see that on the y-axis, it doesn't go down to zero. If it did, you would not see that downward change at all. It would just look flat. On an adjusted basis, 47,000 jobs is just 0.1% of the total. It's almost nothing, right? But if you look at the COVID period from the peak in January 2020 to the lowest point in November 2020, the number of payrolled employees only fell by 968,000. So this number does not tend to go up and down by very large amounts. And if you look at this chart, it shows the year-on-year change as a percentage. And you can see that the December number that just came out is sitting at 0%. Except for the crisis in 2020, this is the only month in this entire data set that is even remotely close to 0%. If you look at the actual numbers, it's actually slightly below 0%. And when you take into account the fact that the population is currently growing reasonably fast, that makes it even worse. So the number of jobs contracted for the first time on this chart in December, except for the one-off drop in 2020. But remember that this is just a flash estimate. So it is likely to be adjusted quite a bit up or down in the next few months. Now, wage data also came out. And wages in Great Britain are growing at 5.6% a year. It's actually ticked back up. It was 5.2% in the previous read. And that is very high. And it is a direct product of the minimum wage rising by 10% last April after going up another whatever it was 10% the year before. 5.6% does not sound like a lot, but if wages grow at 5.6% every year, those wages will double in just 12 years. And this is while at the same time the UK economy is not growing. It is sitting at 0% growth. It has pretty much not grown at all in the last 6 years. Wages growing very fast while the economy is not growing is a big red warning flag, saying that something is very broken in the system. And wages growing fast while the number of people in jobs is falling is another red flag. That should not be happening. The number of vacancies in the 3 months to December was almost flat. It fell ever so slightly from the previous read, down from 813 to 812,000. But the key here is that the downward trend is still continuing. This is the 30th month in a row where job vacancies are falling. And at the beginning of this 30-month period, it did make sense because job vacancies absolutely exploded in 2021. But the number of jobs available now is lower than in 2018 and in 2019, even though the population of the UK has been growing quite a bit since then. Unemployment rate went up to 4.4%, and it's still not very high in absolute terms. Historically speaking, that is a moderate number, but you can see that the trend here is up. It is continuing to trend up, and this is now the highest level of unemployment since the summer of 2021. You won't read it in news headlines for some reason, but that is a fact. I went and looked at the data. So unemployment is not exploding just yet. It is not quite going up in a vertical line. It is going up relatively slowly, and it is still moderate, but the warning signs that it is going in the wrong direction are most definitely there. I went through the redundancy data, and mass redundancies are actually relatively low at the moment. That's great, right? So we're not seeing companies laying off. We're not seeing companies panicking yet. We're not seeing any of that action. That's good. So at the moment, the data is suggesting that the pace of hiring has slowed significantly because we're not seeing those big layoffs. So as there is natural attrition in the workforce, people retiring, etc., those people are not being replaced. We're not seeing as many people go and enter the workforce. We need to keep an eye out on how this data shapes up as we approach April. If you want to make sure that you follow all the important economic news from the UK, please go and subscribe to this brand new channel so that you don't miss anything. I know that most of you watching these videos are not yet subscribed because this is a brand new channel. So make sure you go and do that. Make sure you go and hit that bell to get notifications whenever I post a video. It would really help this channel grow, reach more people, so that I can spread the message, share the unfiltered insight that the mass media is currently basically ignoring. So please go and subscribe and hit the bell if you haven't done so already. Thank you. Now, the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee is going to meet on the 6th of February in about 2 weeks. And this is the last major report that will feed into their decision on interest rates. This jobs report suggests that the Bank of England needs to continue cutting rates before the job situation begins spiraling out of control because it's getting worse and the rate at which is getting worse, looks like it might begin to accelerate. But on the other hand, wages are also running very hot, and the increase in national insurance means that prices could move up in the coming months because the firms that have these wages that are going up, that have the national insurance going up, they have to decide what to do. You either increase prices or you have less staff, or a combination of the two, right? So that is a counter argument against reducing rates at the moment because wages are running so hot. And the truth is, it's very, very hard for the Bank of England to make this call. Almost impossible because it's like a lose-lose decision. As whenever the Bank of England is doing anything, the government at the moment seems to be doing the opposite thing, trying to do the opposite of helping. It's like the Bank of England is trying to pull a heavy cart. And Rachel Reeves is there loading more weight onto the cart while simultaneously taking wheels off that cart and then sitting there wondering why is it that the cart isn't moving. If this jobs data is an indicator of what is coming this year, then the UK can forget about growth. Whatever they all say about growth, it's not coming. If the number of people in jobs is falling, if wages are continuing to climb very fast, way ahead of inflation, we're probably looking at a recession. I know that Keir Starmer wants AI to come and magic growth just out of thin air, but unfortunately Mr. Keir Starmer will have to find out the hard way that AI is in fact not just magic. And on another point, the UK government has been working to try and stop people avoiding payroll taxes by classifying themselves as self-employed. This has been going on for a very long time, predates this government. There was this whole IR35 issue, and just yesterday, the Financial Times published an interview with Margaret Beales titled UK's Labour Markets Are Cause for Crackdown on Bogus Self-Employment. And I know that it should be obvious, even to a mentally challenged raccoon, but what do you think is going to happen to self-employed numbers relative to payroll numbers when you significantly increase employers' national insurance? You know who doesn't pay employers' national insurance? Contractors, like self-employed type people. And I know that this is not an option that is available to most people, but I would not be surprised if there is a move away from people being on the payroll where it's possible and becoming independent contractors working through their own limited companies. Then they can go and get paid without the employer's national insurance coming out, and then they can pay themselves dividends from the profits, thereby achieving the exact opposite effect of what the government is trying to do and paying less tax instead of more tax. I guess we will see what happens. Stay tuned, and I'll see you later.